The Big 12 had a nightmarish Saturday. You saw it, and I saw it, and everyone sitting in front of their TV saw it yesterday, and a couple of dozen of you may have been unfortunate enough to be in your home stadiums. The Big 12 Saturday, it was, you know what it looked like? Because I watched Texas too, and I watched Oklahoma too, and you know my fascination with trains. It was kind of like watching a train, but on this train, there are a couple of engines, and then they're just cabooses. There's no middle. It's just a couple of engines, and they're big, and they're powerful, and they're incredible to look at, and that's Texas and Oklahoma, and we'll see about Oklahoma State. And then they're just like 20 cabooses. And that was Kansas State, and that was Iowa State. I'm a little down about Iowa State, and you know why. So I'm not even going to give you the pleasure of talking about it much, but I will say this. In summary, if you missed this yesterday, Iowa State paid, not UL Lafayette, just flat out University of Louisiana. They paid the Ragin' Cajuns $350,000 to come up there and slap them around by double digits. Kansas State paid Arkansas State over $500,000 to hang an L on them. Coastal Carolina went to Kansas and got up by such a big margin in the first half, and there were so few people in the stands, the field microphones actually caught Coastal Carolina players yelling what was an absolute truth at that point, and that is, these boys can't play with us. Yeah. Back-to-back years now, Coastal has put it on Kansas. So most people watch this and they laughed, unless you're a fan of one of the aforementioned programs, and I understand that. Now, I was happy that the Big 12 was able to get their season off the ground, but I understand why a lot of you were laughing. I was watching, and I had a little bit different take on that, and what I was looking at was I was saying, this seems to be a wide-open path for two teams from this conference to make the playoff. You think that's crazy right now, only because it does sound crazy right now. I'll grant you that. It's early September. But, as I said, Texas looked great against mighty UTEP, and Oklahoma looked great against Bobby Petrino and the Missouri State Northeast Southwest whatevers they played. But I was listening to some people talk, and it was like people were so down on the Big 12 with good reason, but not the whole Big 12. Make no mistake. Now, I heard Barton Simmons refer to it as having no in between. There is no middle ground here. It's kind of like a couple of mansions and then everything else below the poverty line. And that may be. And again, we haven't seen Oklahoma State, TCU, so we'll see about them. But right now it's Texas OU, and it's just a bunch of. And you can fill in the blank there, whatever you want to use to describe what we saw yesterday. But how could this work? How could potentially this conference sneak not one but two teams into the college football playoff? Well, I'll tell you. Think it through with me. This, I don't think, is that wild in theory. The SEC is playing 10 conference games. It is very unlikely, not impossible, but very unlikely that two teams with sparkling enough resumes are going to emerge from that conference to warrant two spots in the college football playoff. Again, I've got two SEC teams predicted to make the playoff, so I don't think it's impossible, but it's going to be really hard to do. It's going to be really hard to do. So are they going to have two resumes good enough from the SEC? Let's just say for the time being, no. I watched Clemson yesterday. I've never used the word lock in September, but they're about as close as I would ever get to referring to a team as a playoff lock in September. So let's say we got one from the SEC. Let's say we got one from the ACC. What's the G5 doing? That's the next question. And they may send somebody that looks good enough. They may not send somebody that looks good enough. But the point is, do you hear where I'm going here? We haven't filled 4 of our spots yet. And so the Big 12 needs a few things to happen. The Big 12, number one, they need a big 3. Oklahoma, Texas, they need at least one more of these teams. Theoretically, it would be Oklahoma State to really shine and to play at a top 10 caliber level, wire to wire. They need that for perception and for reasons I'm about to talk about in just a second. But also, out of this hodgepodge of mediocrity or less, and Iowa State's in here and Kansas State's in here, don't know about Baylor, don't know about TCU, but my point is, out of that whole group, they got to have at least 2 teams emerge that are considered good. Top 20, top 25-ish, I don't know how much weight, top 25 carries in a year where, I don't know, maybe 2/5 of your Power 5 teams aren't out. Maybe we'll see. As I say often, our balls are in the Big Ten's court right now. But they need that to happen, and then they need the G5s to fall. Louisiana, nice story. UCF, nice story. Memphis, whatever, fill in the blank. We need them to fall if we're the Big 12. But if those things happen, and none of these things have been crazy that I've suggested yet, if those things were to happen, Here's the biggest hurdle they're going to overcome or have to overcome, and that is memories of week one. Because Colin's showing you, if you're watching on YouTube, a bunch of still photos of just the debacles that were, multiple debacles in the Big 12 yesterday. The problem is we're coming up very quickly on an endpoint, and that endpoint is you are not going to have any cross-pollination of conferences after that. Everyone's playing inside their bubble. And so what will happen is you may watch Iowa State in week 4, week 5, week 8, week 9, and you may say, oh, they look a whole lot better. But then someone else is going to look you in the face and say, yeah, but how can you know? Like, don't confuse parity, where a whole lot of teams look competitive. Don't confuse parity with quality, because it could just be that you're watching a whole lot of bad teams play each other in the Big 12, and you don't know any better, because after week 1 and week 2, they haven't ventured out, because that's not the way the sport is designed this year, and played anyone outside the conference. And if we want to talk about week 1 and week 2, do you remember what happened to Kansas State? Do you remember Iowa State? So that would be the biggest hurdle. That and Texas or Oklahoma State or Oklahoma, 2 of the 3, having good enough resumes, past conference championship Saturday, that is, to get in a playoff. So I'm just saying it's something that I would watch. I know it's fun to laugh at people at their misfortune right now. I wouldn't necessarily laugh too hard at the Big 12. And if the conference is as bad as it looked yesterday, trust me, you'll have plenty more opportunities to laugh before the season's over.